Today we celebrate the 21st Sunday of Ordinary Time. And during our liturgy today, we have these beautiful readings that are going to bring us a little closer into the mystery of the Eucharist. And one of the interesting things that are coming to us from these readings, from the book of Joshua, from St. Paul to the Ephesians, and into the Gospel of John, is as follows, and we hear in the first part of our collect, and I'll read to you. O God, who caused the minds of the faithful to unite in a single purpose, grant your people to love what you command and desire what you promise, that amid the uncertainties of this world, our hearts may be fixed on that place where true gladness is found. And in our opening reading from the book of Joshua, coming to us from chapter 24, we find Joshua gathering all the tribes of Israel. And in doing so to Shechem, he also invites the elders and the judges and the commissioners, all those who are part of God's people. And in doing so, he asks them, having crossed the river Jordan, been given the blessing of Moses to enter into the promised land, will they still be faithful to the God who's been with them since they were taken out from the house of slavery into the wilderness and has guided them and cared for them? And through all the troubles and complaining, he now presents them an opportunity, like Moses did, if you recall, in the accounts of the Exodus, where he asks them to, in their hearing today, to make a decision. Will they choose God, the God of their ancestors, who has been with them from the time they left the house of slavery, or being in the land of the Amorites now, will they give themselves over to this people and their gods? And Joshua makes the bold proclamation. He says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And in fact, we see this also proclaimed by Israel as a whole. And they also will say, like Joshua did, and I'll read that little portion to you. Therefore, we will also serve the Lord, for he is our God. So we have this wonderful story coming, showing it as a sign of a united people of God. And when we turn to our gospel, we find at the end of the Bread of Life discourse that we've been hearing from the Gospel of John, the 6th chapter of the Gospel of John, we see Jesus asking an even more demanding question about faith and about what he is asking of us. And let me read from what Jesus has said in this gospel account. Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh and the Son of Man and drink his blood, you will have no life in you. Troubling words indeed, coming from Jesus. In fact, some of the listeners who would be considered disciples, followers of Jesus, find it too much and they decide to leave and no longer follow Jesus. And Jesus will turn to his disciples, who amongst them that he knew, not only were they grumbling and complaining about this teaching, but also he knew the ones that didn't believe who he was, and also the one who would betray him. And Jesus turns to the 12 and he asks them, will you also go away? Now this isn't just an important question for them, it's an important question for us. When we are faced with difficult teachings coming from his church and from many of the other things of the world that will pull us in a different direction away from relationship with God, through our own limitations, our own desires that don't allow us to stay in that beautiful relationship with our God, from a lack of faith. And Jesus asks them that bold question. Peter, who represents a spokesperson for the 12 tribes of Israel, comes forward with the answer. Now, how do we live that out is an important question that follows this important teaching, because we know that the words that Jesus is bringing as he would say, the words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. So this is important for us to keep in mind, this teaching that's brought forward to us today, but even more so in terms of how we respond to this gospel call of Christ today. It would be important to understand that Paul, preaching in Ephesus, shares an interesting insight in this. Paul goes on and he teaches the importance of how we are to live in service to one another. In fact, he uses the great metaphor and image of marriage and covenant. How do wives serve their husbands? How do husbands serve their wives? And he uses this as a way to describe the way the church community is in relationship with Christ. And so on this particular Sunday, we can take some comfort in knowing that we also have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Holy Eucharist. And I would recommend to you this week, if you have some time, go in and look at the church's teaching coming from an encyclical letter by St. John Paul II. And I encourage you to maybe even read the opening chapter, chapter 1, on the mystery of faith. And together, this is a very simple way that we can respond in faith to this call that we have from our Lord to gather together, to listen to His word, to ask Him for what we need, and allow ourselves to be placed in these simple gifts of bread and wine that are transformed into His body and blood, where He gives Himself totally to us. His body, His blood, soul, and divinity. And our simple act of faith is where we can begin to understand these teachings.